Okay, I have a favor to ask. Thank you, Dallas already knows. Can we all come together over here on this side? And you need to sit by people. You need to sit by people that can talk. Maybe sit by people that have a book in their hand, that have done a little reading. We're going to do things a little differently tonight. By the way, you can sit down.
Don't sit by someone who talks too much.
Okay, so we're going to have a little more discussion.
Check.
Within your area. So within the groups of like 4 to 6 people, we're going to have more discussion that way than just listening to us talk. Does that sound good? Now everybody moved back to the very far, so we can only ask so much, right?
Now, this is truly the dynamic of the mastermind. It's in an intimate setting. Now, it depends on the audience for the facilitator to change the way that they share the mastermind. But the real design, the real dynamic is an intimate setting where we collectively talk and not just rehash the chapters. And last week we kind of went through what the chapters were. We did a lot of teaching, but now let's do some talking. And that's kind of what we want to do tonight. All right? Before we get started and before I turn this over to Kathy, I want to ask you guys a question. Let's play a scenario. Let's tell a story. What if I were to get a gym membership, go to the gym, my workout clothes that I just bought, I'm ready to go, and I sit in the lobby all that for the couple hours and I just scan on Facebook? What would be the point of that? Through osmosis? Wouldn't I start working out? Wouldn't I get a little bit stronger? Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But how often do we do that in other environments? I.e., church. Now, I'm not preaching to you, I'm not telling you shame, shame, shame. This is mean. This is why I share it, is because I felt conviction a couple times ago that I came and I found myself just kind of going through the motions. I wasn't living for the moment. I came to church to have church, not to sit on my chair, not to keep my hands there. Now, if I put it in a vernacular like a workout environment, we all think, you're wasting money, you're wasting your time, why in the world? But isn't that what I was doing in that chair? So the cares of the world are great. I know, and Sister Dawn, my heart bleeds for you because you're heavy. And you can't do anything about it. That's part of life. But then there's others who are just, we had long days. Well, for the next couple hours, shape that. You're at the gym.
How about less than an hour? Just less than an hour.
Less than an hour. Yeah, less than an hour. Let's shake it off and let's have a great time interacting and learning. This is an opportunity for you to build some of your knowledge. So that's that's the intro.
Okay, tonight we're going to talk about chapters 2 and 3 from this book, and it's the law of influence and the law of process. I'm just curious, how many of you guys are reading the chapters before tonight? Awesome. Okay, so great. If you have not read it, I just encourage you to split up the family a little bit and work around people that have read it, because they'll give a little insight when we start asking some questions. And usually when I start a class, the first thing I do is I have everybody stand up and move. Pick a new seat next to somebody you were not last sitting next to. How would you guys feel about that? What's that, Ethan? Are you good with that? Yeah. Sister Vicki? My husband's over here whispering, don't do that. Don't do that. No, I'm not going to do that. But there's value. There's value when we meet other people and when we talk with other people, and that's what we want to do, is increase our learning. So, law of influence.
All right, so as we read the law of influence, and we covered the law of process in a little bit, this is kind of in a baseball term what we would use is it's in our wheelhouse. So if someone throws a ball in our wheelhouse, means that it's exactly where we like it, and we're going to crush it because we liked it. This is a couple chapters of the book that the law of process is one of Kathy's favorite, and the law of influence is one of my favorite. And the reason why the law of influence is one of my favorite chapters of the book is because it's right there in your face. You can't misinterpret what influence is. And you can't misinterpret, when it comes to leadership, the importance of what influence is. And I love the secondary title, The Law of Influence. A true measure of leader is influence.
Nothing more, nothing less.
And that's just been so ingrained in us. That leadership is a lot of things, depending on, okay, I'm a leader of a big group, I'm a leader of a small group, I'm a leader of this group, I'm a leader of my family, I'm a leader of myself, and so on and so forth. But in every single case, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. If you do not have influence with the people that you're leading, look behind you because you might be walking alone. And that's it, as in your face and clean cut and dry as you can get. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now, one of the things, before we start asking the questions, is there was a paragraph in the chapter that says, leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. That it only comes from influence and it cannot be mandated. Now, we've kind of covered that in the first couple of nights that we met, that leadership, it's not a positional, I guess it can be a positional place that you find yourself. A manager is somewhat of a leader. But true leadership is not appointed. It becomes anointed. True leadership, people will follow you because they bought into you. True leadership happens when they see you leading, they like what you're selling, they're drinking the proverbial Kool-Aid, and they're going to fall in line and follow you. That's influence. And you see influence. You want to know if a leader has influence? Pay attention to nonprofits. Pay attention to weekend events. Pay attention to church environments. You're not getting paid for being here. You're here because you want to. And the people you follow, the pastor who's over you, and I say that in a spiritual sense, has influence. They're the people who have influence. And that's where the business environment can learn a lot, is that there's nothing to be gained from the people financially that fall behind, that support, that lift the hands up of the person that's leading the charge. And there's a great example of a leader is in a church environment, pastors. So, I want to ask you a question. As we get talking about the book, and in the book there were specific examples of what a leader looks like. Let me ask you guys this. In your mind, and there's 25 people here, could be 25 different answers. No right or no wrong. What does a leader look like to you?
So this is where we want you to group together with the people sitting next to you and just have a quick discussion. Twofold, we're going to add a little bit to this question. Number one is, how do you even define influence? And number two, what does a leader with influence look like to you? If you picture somebody and think, yeah, they're influential, how can you describe them? What do they look like to you that makes them influential?
And let's let this part evolve into telling us why. Why is that person influential? Don't just say, well, so-and-so. Well, why? Just because. No, let's do a deep dive into this. What does a leader look like? Why are they influential? What makes them that way?
So we're going to give you guys 2 minutes to talk amongst the people sitting next to you. And again, 2 questions to answer. Number one, how do you define influence? And number two, what does a leader with influence look like? Go. Okay, 30 seconds left. Okay, let's bring our conversations to a close. And what did you guys come up with? First of all, let's start with, how do you define influence? What's that, Brother John? Well, you can. We can.
We couldn't do it in 5 volumes.
Sister Vicky, what did you say?
In school, I was in the class, and there was a lot of discussion, and we had yabbas. So there's a lot of yabbas. Yeah, but.
Oh, okay, so you're saying that you could give a definition, but with a yabba at the end. Okay. Brother Kent, what are you thinking?
Others are willing to follow you and advise you to what you're trying to sell.
Okay, great start. Others are willing to follow you. They bought into what you're selling, even if it's not tangible.
Kath, can I interject something? So what John said was you can't. It's hard to define. Or can we look at it from another aspect of it's kind of easy to define in that we all have our opinions on it. What makes one the expert and the other one not? We never did say that there's one rule of thumb on influence. We just said discuss what an influence looks like. And I even caveated that by saying there could be 25 different answers. Maybe influence, it means a lot different than me than it does Pastor Schmidt. And maybe it's involving my environment, my upbringing, where I came from, my profession. So it's a dynamic word that could have more than one meaning.
So in that sense, someone who influences someone that I want to,
Okay, someone you want to imitate.
so I want to imitate their knowledge, or you know,
Perfect.
I like how this person, you know, talks to someone on the phone, which is my job, and I'm going to imitate the way she answers the phone or the way she interacts on the phone.
Great, I love that. Thank you. And you even followed up with a story, with an example here. So somebody you want to imitate is somebody who is influential in your life.
Hey, John, I can't wait. I can't help but to see your reaction. What are you thinking? What's going on?
That's not influence. You want to be like someone.
But who says that's not? To her, it could be.
You
Now-
know, I'm going to caveat something here too. When I'm learning something technical, like I'm learning how to create a spreadsheet in Excel, or I'm learning how to work Snapchat, stupid app, right? If I'm learning how to do something on my cell phone, that technical ability has a right or wrong answer. There might be multiple ways for me to do it, but there's really a right or wrong. I know if I'm successful if my little Snapchat picture sends to my daughter appropriately, right? When it comes to leadership, there's no right or wrong. There's a lot of right and a lot of wrong. There's a lot of gray in between, and that makes it very challenging because I can't just say, do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be a great leader. There's a lot of ifs and yeah buts and thens and now this and now try this and ooh, this worked for me but not me. That's that's leadership. Pastor.
I think that we all value things differently and we're all different individuals, so that's why leadership for one individual might be something, because I may feel I have some strengths in some areas of leadership, but I know where I'm weak in it. So what I like to try to do and what I just do naturally is there's friends that I have and people in my life I have that I know can influence me in the areas where I struggle. So I think that it is somewhat wanting to be like somebody else because they're doing something that's making you want to do better at what you do. But I also think it's just for everybody that's going to be different because we all have different strengths.
And I like what you said there too, because you're almost attracted to people that are filling a gap for you. It's a weakness possibly. I don't like to use weaknesses all the time, that word, but it's an opportunity for you to grow. So you're attracted to somebody who's doing it well. Okay, good, Brother Tim.
Somebody that has the power to change your opinion.
Ooh, somebody who has the power to change your opinion.
Now, Brother Tim, let's talk a little bit about that. That's a very interesting statement. It's That's beautiful. Your perspective of it is someone who has that ability to change the way you think. Or could it be that you're willing to allow someone to change you? No one's going to be able to change you unless you allow them to, correct? But maybe the fact that you trust them enough, they've displayed leadership techniques, abilities, okay, I might see things his way. That's a very interesting aspect of it.
So with the influence, with leaders that are influential, what do they look like? They're charismatic. Okay, what else?
Let's stop right there. Charismatic. That's a great word, and we hear that a lot in the church environment, right? What does that mean? What does charismatic mean? Huh? Confidence.
Ooh, confidence.
I heard a definition that changed my aspect of that word. Is charismatic, someone with charisma, is the presence they feel when they walk into a room, how people react to it. That's charisma. And I thought to myself when someone shared that, it's like, wow, you know people like that, right? They walk into the room and not command respect or command attention, but maybe the dynamics change a little bit when they walk up to a conversation. That's charisma. Charismatic. Yes, I like it.
What else do leaders with influence look like? Pastor. They're successful. How do you define successful? So they're achieving goals that they've set related to their okay. Okay. Very good, Sister Vicki.
Well, stepping off what Megan said, what's successful in our eyes might be something different to them. So I'm thinking of a person that I feel is quite influential to me at work, but when she walks into a room, she doesn't, there is no wow factor, but I feel that she's content in the place where she is.
That's a great point. So do you think that a leader with influence has to be all of these adjectives or all of these words? Sister Michelle's shaking her head. No. They may not be any of the words that we're sharing. They might be something different, but still be influential.
Sister Michelle, do you mind sharing what you're thinking on this? Be able to expound a little bit?
Trying to be like somebody else, but it might be trying to obtain maybe that skill that they're doing. Or a lot of times, right, I think of people at work and I look at, wow, they really held themselves highly, they were posed, they were very professional in how they reacted to something. So to me, that's influence and that's leadership.
So we look at leaders and we see their characteristics, their behaviors, their actions. And some of the people tonight already said that's kind of a favorable trait that I'm willing to emulate, that kind of draws me to that person. Guess what? That's influence. That's influence. That's making me, that's sharpening my sword. When we talked about what does a leader look like, how many of you, from a show of hands, could visually identify a person, a particular person in your life? All right, Brian, you raised your hand. Sister Sharon, she's raising her hand. We know that person. Now let's think about that for a moment. Let's really pick this apart. Why? What was that person? Why does that person have that thing about us? What made us think of that person? Sister Schmidt, you care to share?
A couple people come to mind. One is my dad and my mom. I think because, of course, there's that personal influence that happened. I think it's one thing when you see somebody in front and show, it's another thing when you know it's really real. And I think that's really key in that I think part of influence is that they can relate to you, that they're not above you, that they are, somebody, so to speak, a fellow struggler, because nobody is perfect, right? Also, I have some mentors that I would say are also influential at work, and when that person is speaking in the meeting, you want to listen because you're going to glean something from it. And I think those are the kinds of things that say, that's leadership, or that's an influence.
Did they have that, hold on 1 minute, did they have that all the time, or through a series of events, or maybe a time continuum, they've established that?
So I think that it could be situational, right?
Yep.
Depending. But I think in the realm of their profession, it's something that's grown over time.
And through the whole process, you might have seen them succeed, or we use another word, win at what they do, achieve goals. So you watch their cause and effect relationship, and wow, they get results. And through their actions, they success. And I want to emulate that. That's influence on us, right? So right away, we're talking about many, many different aspects of influence.
Now, I'll be honest, as much as John loves this law, it's the most difficult for me to grasp. Influence is so hard for me to define and visualize. It's what? It is not black and white. Nope. No, you can't. You can't just grab something and say this is it. But I do like to think of people, or I do like to see people, I do like to research people that are influential and figure out what they're doing. So John, you have somebody in mind, somebody in history that I know nobody has ever met because he's been gone long before we were alive. But there's movies about him, there's a lot of history about him.
Yeah, all right, so it's alluded to in the chapter, but they start talking about Abraham Lincoln. And specifically, like the war, that was the Civil War that was going on. But I want to tweak this a little bit about Abraham Lincoln. To me, he's one of the most influential presidents that ever lived. How many of you guys have done research on Abraham Lincoln? We all know he's our 16th president. He was the president during the Civil War. But an in-depth study on who Lincoln was. Raise your hand. There's a lot of presidents, no worries. Here's the fascinating thing I found about Abraham Lincoln that, to me, just put him up on the, I don't want to use the word pedestal, but as a good president. He did something that has never been done prior to him, and to the best of my knowledge, he's never done since. He picked his cabinet not along party lines. In fact, the cabinet that he picked when he became president, many of his cabinet was against him. They weren't for the things that President Lincoln wanted to push through Congress. And people thought, why? What's the deal? Why would you even do that? Why would you put enemies in your cabinet? And he said this, he said, if I can convince the people who are closest to me that might not agree with me, this is the way to go, I can convince the American people the same thing. What an amazing leader.
So it'd be like President Trump putting Hillary Clinton on his cabinet.
Yeah, probably, absolutely. Although there's a few errors on that part. Probably wouldn't compare the two as president, but yeah. So that's like me surrounding myself with maybe not so pro people on the things that I agree with, because one, he wanted to look at things from a different perspective. He was humble. Now, losing 8 different elections in his previous political lifetime kind of helps him be humble somewhat. But he also realizes the value in other people's opinions. Now, when push comes to shove, he wasn't also afraid to say, you know what, this is the way we're doing it. All right, so he also had some backbone. But he surrounded himself by people not of the same mindset. That's crazy. Especially in that time. Johnny.
Well, the person does not, well, I'm influential. You don't know. It's other people that give you that thing, make you influence, right?
So I understand what you're saying. Is it possible for me to determine that I am influential?
Well,
It absolutely can be a personal thing if you're alluding to someone else. I think it's a little audacious to say that me personally, I'm a person of influence.
Right.
The true barometer of that is who's following me.
Well, I think from other people will tell you that yes, you're influential.
Then that's their definition. And what Sister Schmidt said speaks volumes, that this influence is a subjective concept. You can't put your finger on it. No one really has, it's not a measurable outcome. Other than the fact that you look behind you and you've got a lot of people back there, you must be having something. But it's an intangible thing. It's tough to wrap your around. Now take into account this. What's our personality? Do we need structure? Do we need objectivity? Do I need to have a measurement to be able to define something? That's that whole color thing, right? If I'm a person of a certain color, that I need statistics and I need hard evidence for me to believe that, this is going to be a tough one to understand. And that's okay.
So let's go even further back in history, and let's look at a leader that we've read about in the Bible. Let's look at Joshua. Okay, young people, you guys remember the 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. What did they see when they spied on Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. I'm the only one that knows that song. Great. Do you know
guys have never heard that song before?
Some saw giants big and tall, some saw grapes of wrath did fall. 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. Great, good, just taught you a song. I'm old, right? So let's just talk about the story of 12 men who 12 men who went to spy on Canaan. These were 12 leaders that went to spy on Canaan. And they were spying on Canaan to see if we could take it, if we could get out of the wilderness, right? So they came back, and 10 of those leaders said, no, we cannot take this land. They did, they lied. They said things were bigger than what they were. They were fearful. And they said, no, we can't do it. But Joshua and Caleb came back and said, yeah, we can. Oh my gosh, this is so doable. They were the positive side. They were saying, let's do this. But they were defeated. They were already leaders, so they had some sort of influence, but they didn't have enough influence against the other 10 who said, no way. Brother Tim?
Well, you didn't talk about influence in numbers.
Influencing, okay, so that can go two ways, because Joshua is in the book of Numbers, or influence in the quantity of people, right? Right, exactly. So when you're looking at those 12 men, those 12 leaders, they were influential. They had numbers, quantity of people supporting them. But not when you put them all together. Joshua and Caleb did not have enough to support. So what did that cause, everybody? 40 more years in the wilderness. And every one of those 10 leaders that said, no, we can't do this, never saw the promised land. They died in the wilderness. What's going on with Joshua? Because we know the end of the story. Joshua's the one who led them through to the wilderness eventually. Hold on, if he didn't have influence, there's hope, because he eventually did have enough influence to lead the Israelites to the promised land. So what happened here that allowed him to grow and increase his influence? Brother Tim? You know what? That is one of them. Absolutely. Time is one of the action items that we can put on our side here. And you know, I remember when I turned 30, suddenly I was given more influential opportunities. Suddenly people listened to me a little differently. And I remember saying, what's the deal at age 30? There is something with age. We do have to live through experiences. It's like listening to an inspirational speaker that's 18 years old. Come on, how much experience do you have, right? I can only listen so long before I realize you're just naive in what's going to happen in this world. But there's time that we do need to give, and through time, Joshua became more influential.
Now, as the story ends and they go into Jericho, was everything tiptoeing through the tulips for them, for him to show his influence? Did he have all the buy-in from the people of Israel? It was probably pretty wavering when he asked them to march around the city 7 times and then blow a horn and cheer and the walls are going to come down. What would that have been like?
However, another way to increase your influence or to grow in your influence is timing.
Right.
You know, back 40 years ago, when 12 men went to spy in Canaan, everything wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. We could sit in the wilderness a little longer. And through 40 years, finally, you know what? Enough's enough. I've had enough. I'm ready now. Joshua, what will you have us to do? I'll do it. Timing was not on his side 40 years earlier. How many times do I listen to God, right? I listen to God in quotes, but then yet do it my way. And it never quite goes right. And finally I'm like, hands in the air, okay, God, I give. What should I do? The timing has to be right for our influence to be there.
So as we wrap up this and we start going into the next chapter, I want to ask you, do you remember what I talked about, the two things that I ask myself when I wake up and the two things that I ask myself before I go to bed? I can't tell you in front right here and declare that I have influence over people. But when I talked about that rule of 5 and chopping that tree and doing small things every day, this is how I'm trying to build influence. Every day I try to build a little bit more, do the small things. Is every morning I wake up, who do I want to impact today or influence, and how am I going to do it? And then when I go to bed, did I impact someone? Did I gain influence from someone? And how did I do it? If we can ask ourselves that every morning and then hold ourselves accountable every night, we're going to raise that bar of influence. We talk about not just information, but application. A leader is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If we're leaders and we want to strive to be a better leader, it all stems around influence. So you have to make a decision, be intentional on raising that bar. You're not going to stumble into influence. It's got to take effort.
3 more ways that Joshua showed an increase in his influence was, number 1, he had a great mentor. Do you know who it was? It was Moses. Moses mentored him. Number 2, another thing he had on his side was humility. How did he get that? He was patient. He was patient and he stood his ground. And that's number 3. He was convicted and he had character and he did not waver. The Joshua 40 years earlier who said, we can take this, was the same Joshua 40 years later that said, we can take this. He did not change. And that credibility just makes him even more influential because people over time saw he's real. This is a real thing. He is the same on stage as he is back home. That is what increases or helps us grow our influence.
And the scripture to expound on that is, having done all else, stand. When you know you're right and you know your purpose is solid and based on the foundation of God, stand on it. Even when there's 10 people against you saying, you're crazy, we're going to get killed over there. No, I believe in what I believe. Having done all else, stand.
Okay, let's go on to the law of process. And this is where we're going to need that blank piece of paper that we handed out in the beginning. Real quick, again, with the groups that you're sitting around, quickly discuss what is the law of process? How do we define that? I'll give you guys 90 seconds to come up with a definition. How do we define law of process? Okay, law of process. What are you guys coming up with? How do you define law of process? Seth? Step by step, right? Ethan, didn't you just tell me earlier there's a system for everything? Right? I talked to him earlier. I'm like, we're talking about both leadership or influence and process is going to talk about our conversation here. Good. How else do you define law of process? Consistency, steadiness. Good. Brother Ken?
Is it related to your daily habits or that you want to do on a daily basis, especially?
Bingo. There's no instant gratification when you look at the law of process. It's about daily habits, day by day, increasing your abilities through the processes that you're doing, right? Good. Okay, so the sheet of paper, I have some questions for you, and this is just kind of quiet reflection time. Write down your answers here on the sheet of paper. No need to share. Just kind of think about and write them down. So the first question I have for you is, what are you doing to build yourself up as a great leader? What are you doing to build yourself into a great leader? Do you need paper? Okay, so to dig in that a little deeper, I'm curious, what book are you reading right now? And you can't say the Bible, okay? You can't say the Bible. Okay, you can't say Laws of Leadership. Sister Schmidt? That's a good one. You don't have to tell us. Leading Difficult Personalities. Ethan? 500 Tips for Deer Hunting. Love it, love it. Pastor? Follow to Lead. Anyone else want to share? What book are you reading right now? What is that one called, Sister Lynn? Burn Your Bridges? Okay, so we got some books reading. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, what was the last thing that you did that made you nervous? So when we were at the conference a few weeks ago in Orlando, I applied for stage time, it's called. You prepare a 3-minute speech and you get to talk in front of 2,500 people. My bucket list is to eventually talk in front of 10,000 people. Wouldn't that be so exciting? I never get a response from that question. I'm the only one that gets excited about that. So I was one of 30 people that got the opportunity to audition, and we had a semifinalist round where we practiced, right? And from there they chose 12 people. I wasn't one of the 12. I was one of the 30, and let me tell you, I was nervous. I was really nervous, but finally I got on the stage with the microphone and it all came together. But it was nerve-wracking. Like, I was kind of shaking, and that's just awkward. It's uncomfortable. So what's the last thing that you've done that makes you nervous? Just write it down. Challenge yourself here. Write it down. What's the last thing you did that made you nervous? Another question I have for you is, what new hobby are you learning right now? Are you taking on a new hobby like sewing or canning or gardening or cooking or bow hunting, or what new hobby are you purposely learning right now? A new musical instrument? Is anyone purposefully taking on a new hobby right now, learning it? When's the last time you took on a new hobby? Ethan? Playing football. That's new for you this year, right? Absolutely. Does it make you nervous? Sometimes. Okay, cross that off, those 2 questions, right? The last question I have for you, oh no, I have 2 more. This question, what sacrifices are you making to reach your goals? So here's some examples to some sacrifices. Money would be a sacrifice, right? If you have to invest money, it might be a sacrifice. But maybe I'm sacrificing something like my TV time. Or I'm sacrificing Candy Crush. Or I'm sacrificing a new game that just came out. Sometimes we have to sacrifice things we like to meet goals that we're going for. So what are you sacrificing? And this is something just to write down. And the final question I have for you is, what is your plan for your own personal growth?
Now, we're seasoned in this room, okay? How many of you ever have heard, a personal growth plan? Some people, yeah, okay. Actually, more than I expected. More than I expected.
Now you guys can flip your sheets over if you like. So here's the deal with the personal growth plan. Do you guys ever do a New Year's resolution? And Vicky's like, no. Yeah, how many of you keep the New Year's resolution after the month of February? Good.
Now some people,
good job.
So some people who are shaking their heads, is it because of the past? Is it because past failures?
Just don't set yourself up for failure.
So you already know, regardless of what you were planning on doing, You're probably not going to get there.
There's a lot of reasons why.
I've had so much experience of, February,
All right.
There's so many reasons why New Year's resolutions don't work, but what I have is something a little different. I have a personal growth plan template here in front of you. And this is just getting you to think a little differently. Have you ever thought about a word of the year? You ever thought to think about, God, what do you want from me this year? What's the word that you want to drive me this year? Or do you have a scripture that just is, it's you, it's what drives you every day to be better? It just is embedded in your heart. You've memorized it and you love it. Have you ever documented that? Have you ever looked at writing down things? I have to cheat and find my little template here. Writing down things like, do you have a song? Just for you, not for your marriage or anything, but just for you. Do you have a song that just speaks your life? How about last week we talked about, Caitlin, do you have a song? What is it? Can I ask? Say it again. Speak life.
Not
deep.
DC Talk. That's Toby Mac.
Toby Mac.
Who was in DC Talk.
That's deep. Then we go back to last week's lesson, the power of five or rule of five, the things that you do, the 5 things you do every day: read, write, pray, exercise, whatever it might be. Then we can go a little deeper and think, okay, what's my personal growth plan for different areas of my life, like my spiritual growth, my educational growth, my financial growth, my emotional growth? Have you ever taken time to think about, where do I want to grow in these areas? Now, when it comes to things, for example, educational growth, do you know how many books people read after they graduate high school? 0. The average number is 0. Well, I know that's not really average because I read books, right? But it's very common. Majority of people in this world read nothing after they graduate high school. Dallas, how many books have you read? None? I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just kidding. Okay, so your learning really doesn't stop. Here's a revelation. Your learning doesn't stop when you graduate high school. Your learning actually is just beginning. And when my kids graduated, I said, now is when finally you'll start learning. Because now is when you'll learn most about yourself. But if you don't take time, if you're not purposeful and create a process for your own development, your own growth, guess what's going to happen? You're the Dead Sea. Nothing's going to happen. So here's some facts for the Dead Sea. Okay, we're going to get a little deep here. You ready for this one? The Dead Sea has nothing living in it. Nothing. No parasites, no seaweed, no fish, nothing. Why is it? It is too salty. Do you know why it's so salty? It does have something flowing in. The Jordan River and some other little rivers do flow into the Dead Sea, but it has nothing flowing out. So follow this a minute. Let's take it personally. We have a lot flowing in. We come here every Wednesday, every Sunday. We are constantly flowing in, right? If I don't let anything come out, I'm dead. I'm a hoarder of knowledge. I'm a seminar junkie. If I all just take, through evaporation, the water will disappear, but salt is what's left behind. We need to have a fresh flow of everything. We need to give of the knowledge that we're gaining. We need to give of our stories, of what we're experiencing. If I have a personal growth plan and I've purposely said, you know what, spiritually I want to move to a new level, and I know that it's probably going to happen through prayer, I'm going to step up my game and I'm going to pray purposefully 5 minutes a day this whole year. I'm just going to, 5 minutes, that's all. And I'm going to track it. Every few months, I'm just going to review it and ponder, where am I? It sounds like a New Year's resolution, but it doesn't have huge steps. It's just little steps. If I'm not letting stuff come out, it's getting pretty stinky just sitting in. The Dead Sea now is interesting because the Dead Sea actually was the first health resort by King Herod. King David actually loved to go to the Dead Sea as kind of a retreat zone. But the Dead Sea, because of all the salt, it is the supplier of products from balms for Egyptian mummification to potash for fertilizers. So there's value in the Dead Sea. There's value eventually. There's value in us. But imagine how much more value if we have a process in place that purposely makes us think about really, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? Where do I want to grow? What do you guys think of this idea of a personal growth plan? It's very important, and she can say that because you do it, and you see the value. So about 12 years ago, I was pretty much asked to do a personal growth plan, but it was just the last 5 sections of what you see here. So I was told to sit down and write down my educational, spiritual, financial, physical, personal, and emotional goals, but they're my goals 5 years from now, and I need to write them as if I am sitting 5 years from now. So I wrote them in first person. And I said things like, I am in shape because I get up every morning and I walk the dogs and I walk 10,000 steps a day. I am financially secured. We finally paid off our credit cards. I love my job. I'm doing what I love to do. I love to teach. I love to speak. I love to empower other people. At the time I wrote that, none of that was true. Absolutely none of it was true. I don't even think we had a dog. 12 years later, as I look back at that and I laugh and I'm like, wow, I do get up every morning and I walk the dogs. I do walk 10,000 steps a day. I do love what I do. We have paid off some big bills. But it took me to purposely think through, where do I want to be? And if you don't take time to think through that, we're never going to get there.
And that alludes us to the philosophical question is if you don't know what it looks like, how are you going to know when you see it? If you don't know what goals you're fighting for, or your growth plan, when you get there, how do you know it's what you wanted? It's that whole, remember that story I told you about sitting at an airport with a sign and then doing research to know what I'm looking for? You can sit there and let your goals come to you. Good luck with that. And hope that that's kind of what I was hoping for. Or you can be intentional, and there's that word again that we're just knocking out of the park, intentionality, and go after it. You don't know if you don't write it down. Every morning when I open up my medicine cabinet, there's my word of the year. I can't forget it because it's there every day. I've already got my 2018 word picked out, and I need to. I'm not there to impress you. I'm here to impress upon you the importance of keeping it in front of you. We're a people that if it's not always in front of us, we're going to forget. We're going to let it fall by the wayside. Hence not having our New Year's resolutions making it to December. Maybe because it's so grand and so big that there's no way in the world we'll ever be able to be successful in it. Why don't we simplify it? Maybe that's the secret, is let's simplify. How many colors are in the rainbow?
7.
Do you remember what it is?
Roy G. Biv.
Right? Roy G. Biv, we all know that. Very simple.
How many colors are in my crayon box?
1,000.
102.
But sometimes we make it so much more complicated than what it's worth. There's 7 colors in the rainbow, right? But think about what Michelangelo did with those 7 colors. He painted magic. Doesn't have to get any harder than that. We can keep our goals simple, but we need to keep them in front of us.
So the tagline to the law of process says that leadership develops daily, not in a day. So when we're looking at processes, usually when we create a process, we have analyzed all angles and we've picked the best solution. You know, when I look at a process for making dinner, I look at the recipe, I get out the right tools, the right food, I follow the recipe, I turn on the oven, I bake it for the right amount of minutes, and in the end, we have a successful dinner. That's a process. So when we're looking at other processes that deal with leadership, we're really digging inside, again, to something that's really not tangible. It's really difficult to really capture a hold of. But we can treat it just like a recipe. We can treat it the same by creating those action steps. So when you're looking at this personal development plan and you're trying to think about, where do you even want me here? Think of the process that needs to happen. I need to create the plan, then I need to follow the plan, and then I need to recap and review. So at the beginning of the year as a family, we pick a word of the year. My word this year is develop. Part of my action steps here within my personal growth plan are I want to read 12 books this year, 1 book a month. I also want to attend 3 conferences. I also want to make sure that I'm working with people to help develop them with their goals. So I was very specific in my action steps, and as I continue to recap through the year, and I only grab my growth plan, once every other month, that's when it gets really fun. I've attended all 3 conferences. I've read about 6 books so far. I'm a little behind. I gotta catch up a little bit. But that's when it gets really fun. Now here's what else starts happening, is it starts redirecting your brain. So my son Jake, his word is explore. He is a very quiet, introvert type of personality, but he knows he wants more in life, so he says, okay, I need to explore. So in March, we said, hey, we're going to Orlando for a conference. Do you want to go? And he said, yeah, let's explore. In July, his sister said, let's go see Jordan out in Virginia. You want to go? He said, yep, I want to explore. Let's do this. He did it scared. He absolutely did scared. Mind you, he's been on a mission trip to Okinawa. He's done this before, but it's still different, and he likes the same. We said, hey, in a few weeks, we're going to go see your sister at school. Do you want to go for the parent weekend? He's like, go to a campus, a college campus? Yep, let's explore. Not too excited, but always loves the opportunity. It's changed his words. It's changed his mindset this year. His goal is to explore, so everything he's doing, whether it's a new game or a book that he's reading, by the way, he read Laws of Leadership, yep, let's explore. It's changed his approach, and it's helped him reach some of the goals he's really been wanting to reach. It'll change your mindset. What do you think? It is important.
I think it's so important to be mindful. When I do this, it's usually around my prayer time because I'm in the morning and I want, God, who do you want me to be? And when we read scripture and we see those kinds of things, and I have all of these things written down, and I did it many years ago, and it's actually fun to see because I had both short-term, medium kind of goals and long-term goals. And some of those medium goals and some of those long-term goals, I look back and say, yep, that one's accomplished, that one's all done. And you do it, I'm an orange, so I'm not big on process and not necessarily big on those other things. So I think you can work within, your personality, your temperaments, but I think the key thing is you always got to have something out there, and it might be something that God's given you. Hold to that. And allow God to position you and allow you to develop into those areas, because He's given each of us a gift and the ability to also get there if we want to.
That's right. I've been told one time that, I have these goals. I have a personal development plan, but I don't need to write it down. Yeah, you do. Our brains forget things. It's really fun. It's really amazing to me when I do reread these growth plans years later, and I forgot what I originally wrote down. Our brains can't contain. We need a brain dump so that we can add more to our brain and depend on reading the paper later. Writing it down is a different connection in your brain. When you write it down, something's going to happen. So I challenge you to write it down. It's just for you, but watch and see what this law of process will do in your life.
We talk a lot about, from a psychological standpoint, behavior modification. Look at yourself in the mirror. Are you the person that you want to be? Do you have the leadership you want to have? And if you say yes, congratulations. It's possible. But you're the small percent, because I think as a humanistic characteristic, we always want to strive to get better. But in order to get better, we have to modify our behaviors. We have to have our behaviors become habits. Now, as Kathy said, 12 years ago, she created the goal 5 years ahead, and she's doing all that. Now, let's look at it from here. What kind of momentum does she have going when she can look at it and say, I'm doing that. It works. I got this going on. This is working. I can check this one off the list because it's applicable. Now, 5 years going forward, when she puts that goal for 5 years from now, and she writes it in first person, is she going to be a little bit more confident in it? She's got the momentum. She knows the process works. Now I'm not only going to set out things out that I think I can accomplish, I'm going to dream great. I'm gonna go because this stuff can work. You get momentum because you see the process that works by writing it down and keeping it in front of you. It's behavior modification.
Nobody cares about you as much as you do. Not your parents, not your kids, not your pastor, nobody. Young people, your parents do not care about you as much as you do, and this is because we don't always know what you don't know. I remember when we were applying for colleges, Cassie got angry, very frustrated. Why didn't you tell me I should apply for that or apply for this scholarship? Or why didn't you tell me? I didn't know you didn't know. It's not because I was holding something back. I just didn't know what you didn't know. So when it comes to these types of things, nobody's going to keep you accountable. But if you don't like where you're at, nobody cares about you as much as you do. You do have the power to think about it, document it, and change it. Create a process that'll get you to where you really want to be.
Now there's other steps to keep us accountable. Now we're talking into mentorship. We're talking into, I use the word counseling loosely, but find a mentor to hold you accountable.
Accountability partner.
Yes, accountability partner, to where they can hold you accountable. But you got to still be intentional. You still have to write it down, and no one's going to care more for you than what you care, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to let you wear me out if you're not putting forth an effort. But if I see the effort, I'm going to mirror it.
So there's your assignment for next week to at least get it started. Next week, I love it. I love all these laws, but next week's going to be the law of navigation and the law of addition, chapters 4 and 5. So if you do have a book, if you read it ahead of time, by the way, the library has a book as well. Otherwise, we can get them for $20. But chapters 4 and 5 will take us into the next step and more good stuff coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Pastor.